নমস্কার। কোবার্ড গান্ধীর বই ফ্র্যাকচার্ড ফ্রিডমের বাংলা অনুবাদ প্রকাশ উপলক্ষে লেখকের সঙ্গে আজকের কথোপকথনে আপনাদের স্বাগত। কিছু প্রয়োজন এসে পড়ায় আজকের কথোপকথনের সময়টা চূড়ান্ত হতে কিছুটা দেরি হয়েছে, ফলে কথোপকথনটা যেভাবে আমরা সাজাতে চেয়েছিলাম সেটা সম্ভব হয়নি। লেখক বঙ্গানুবাদের প্রকাশ উপলক্ষে বাংলার পাঠকদের উদ্দেশ্যে একটা নোট লিখেছেন। প্রতিবাদে প্রতিরোধে বাংলার ইতিহাসের ওপর লেখক খুবই আস্থাশীল। আমরা চেয়েছিলাম প্রকাশক সংস্থা কাউন্টার এরার সঙ্গে কথা বলতে, কেন তারা এই বইটার অনুবাদের কথা ভাবলেন। অনুবাদক পরিচিত গদ্যকার গল্পকার শ্রী সুপ্রিয় চৌধুরীর কাছ থেকে অনুবাদের অভিজ্ঞতাটা জানাও জরুরি ছিল, কিন্তু সময় সংক্রান্ত অনিশ্চয়তার কারণে আমরা প্রকাশক বা অনুবাদক কাউকেই আজকের কথোপকথনে নিয়ে আসতে পারিনি। আমরা ক্ষমা প্রার্থী। আমাদের চেষ্টা থাকবে এর পরে একদিন প্রকাশক, অনুবাদক এবং পাঠকদের নিয়ে একটি কথোপকথনের আয়োজন করার। আজকের কথোপকথনের আয়োজনটাকে সামনে রেখে প্রকাশক সংস্থা কাউন্টার এরার পাঠকদের কাছ থেকে তাদের প্রশ্ন জানতে চেয়েছিলেন। বেশ কিছু প্রশ্ন এসছে। আমি মূলত সেই প্রশ্নগুলোকেই লেখকের সামনে হাজির করব। আর সময় না নিয়ে আমরা সরাসরি লেখকের কাছে চলে যাই। গুড ইভিনিং, মিস্টার গান্ধী. Once again, congratulations for the 7th translation of your book.
Thank you.
Fractured Freedom.
Thank you.
As we are talking today, I am going to ask you a quite obvious question first. What is your take on the current conflict situation in Europe? Let's start with this.
Oh, okay. Thank you. And I'm very happy that the Bengali edition has come out, and I'm hoping for a lot of response, critiques, and debates from that side on the book, because that livens the atmosphere. Now, to talk about Ukraine. Ukraine, actually, I know very little about it. Only in the course of what has been going on out there, I've just picked up a few threads of what is there, and I feel that it's part of this American, basically it is American Russian contradictions taken to a level, and it's provoked by America. If the background is such that America has been trying to push they installed this fellow he's a comedian, some comedian who's been installed, a Zionist, I think. He's a Jew. And he has just 25% popularity. His popularity is so low just now. And they're trying to prop him up and give him a big image and things like that, the media. But basically, I think it's, if you see the history of Ukraine, it's always been part of the Russian Empire, Russia. In fact, I read somewhere earlier, I heard that its name was earlier Rus. Even the name Ukraine means something linked to Russia. And even Khrushchev was from Ukraine. So, I mean, it's totally intertwined with Russia. And these people have been trying to break away ever since the Soviet Union collapsed. Naturally, America's made inroads, all these orange revolution and pink revolutions and all these colored revolutions have been taking place out there, all basically to push NATO to encircle. I'm not saying Russia is any pure baby or something like that, or socialist country, but the thing is that the provocation, if you look at it, comes from America and the NATO and their NATO allies. And even here, even Germany and France and other European countries are very hesitant to go into conflict with Russia, because they depend on Russian gas, they depend on Russian energy, while America has nothing to lose basically from provoking a war, except that they help their military industrial complex to sell arms. So it's basically American and the Biden administration that is provoking this, and that is the main question, I think. And the media is trying to give it a Russia aggression, this, that. I mean, they were pushing Russia to the wall, and if Russia did not intervene, tomorrow it would have been Ukraine, then another part of Russia, and then another part like that, they were to push NATO further and further. There was an understanding, in fact, that Belarus and Ukraine will not join NATO. But with this fellow, this young comedian who was made prime minister or president or whatever he was, things have changed. And really, it's America trying to destabilize the world as normal everywhere. It's America who's trying to do this. And I don't know what particular thing, maybe COVID is getting over, they want another destabilization of world order or whatever it is, I don't know. But one needs to dig deeper to find the reasons for it. But certainly America is the main provocation. My estimation is Russia is preempted, tried to preempt what America was planning.
Okay. Let me push a second question. In this context, let me ask you, during your young days, a considerable geographical area was in the socialist camp, and now we have none. You have written in your essays prior to this title, people from those geographies didn't vouch strongly enough for the socialist system they were living in to prevent this reverse journey. Perhaps people were not happy as you have guessed. But why is that? What could have gone wrong to make people happy in a system that is supposed to be governed by the working class ideology? Was it ideological cultural issues, mismatched aspirations, delivery failure? Which one?
No, that's the whole purpose of my book, actually. I don't really fractured freedom when I talk about it, is that actually I started when I was in jail and started thinking about the whole process. Those 6 articles I wrote in 2012 from the hard jail started with seeing that not our movement, Indian movement, but the world movement. The world has basically gone backwards. And why? So this whole question of freedom, the question of the philosophical aspect, I thought needed some sort of rethinking, because people cannot be blamed. People have to be developed, they have to be led, they have to be advanced by a proletarian party or some leadership that evolves. That's where the fault would be. And that's basically the essence of the book, is that the questions of the movement, the party, the organization have to evolve. Questions of freedom and happiness and the question of the new value system. New value system, of course, everyone talks about the proletarian values, but it never comes into a practice, particularly with leadership. And so I see that all these things have to be sort of interwoven into it. It's not an easy task. I'm not saying that it's very well to sit here and talk about it and this thing, because you're dealing with a really vicious enemies. I mean, butchers, whether it's the ruling classes, whether it was, we've seen even peaceful movements, they have slaughtered like sheep, whether particularly Indonesia is an example, Chile was an example. They were all parliamentary movements, but millions of communists were killed. So it's not easy. One has to balance these things. And remember that the ruling classes, and particularly if they're in crisis, will be really very vicious. But on the other hand, this humanity, one cannot lose from a long-term perspective. And very often that is sacrificed at the altar of immediate expediency. And that is whether it's in a socialist state or whether it's building an organization.
Right. This is quite a central theme of your book. So let me put the question this way. How did you come to this title? The freeness of freedom being distorted in prison? That's your personal experience? Or in a state like India, ye azadi jhuta hai? Or within the effort of resistance by radical forces? Which one? Or all three? You have been quite elaborate about the individual, about his or her positioning. How does this sense of unfreeness impact an individual? And in this context, what is the relation between individual and collective? What do you suggest?
As far as where the name came from, in the midst 12 o'clock at night, suddenly this name struck me. So in a dream or whether what it was, I don't know. So it just came and I found it very pertinent because it really covers all the 3 points that you mentioned. It's fractured freedom at the level of the Indian state. I mean, we are dependent on imperialism most for everything. It's what was the first this thing that Azadi duty and this then the question of in prison, of course, there was no freedom. It wasn't just fractured. There was really no freedom. I mean, every aspect of one's life was good, particularly in Tihar, I'm saying. Other places was not that bad. And of course, the other point of the individual freedom, alienation, which I've dealt with in the book, all those things, is very much part of the book and that central theme of the third section of the book. So, and which exists in society, it exists in the party organizations and left organizations that is there. So it basically is all three.
Okay. About this individual and collective, let me elaborate a bit. The journey of an individual towards the collective is told to be a conscious effort. And in your philosophical leanings, I believe it is said that the consciousness comes from without. How do you explain the way you are being criticized for believing in mysticism to find freedom and happiness in life?
See, we come to the mysticism afterwards. The point is, which I have also tried to deal with in the book, is that we have always been taught that social being determines consciousness. That's a Marxist theory. And in a very broad aspect, that may be true. But if you look at it mechanically, then we live in a capitalist feudal type of society. We'll never change them because social being is that. The social being is linked to our capitalist and feudal world around us in a country like India. Then how will we change? So that will be our consciousness. So it's not a one-to-one relation, firstly. So firstly, I think that this aspect of what Marx said has been very dogmatically interpreted very often. So that's the first point. Second point is Marx wrote before the birth of psychology as a science. That's Freud. Freud came after Marx. And since Freud, of course, it's developed enormously, psychology. In fact, the ruling classes are using it extensively to brainwash people. The psychology, as I mentioned in my latest article on the lockdown. But the question is that this social being determines consciousness, but our consciousness we have now know is made up of the subconscious and the conscious mind. A subconscious is basically, according to what psychologists mostly say, is formed in the first 7 years of our life. And our mind, 90 to 95%, they say, is the subconscious mind, which is our emotions, feelings, attitudes, all that are developed in the early stages of our life before we develop rational thinking. Rational thinking, they say, comes after. I haven't studied much psychology. I plan to do that, to develop these concepts. But it comes after the 7th year, basically, of a child. And so the subconscious is always there. And when we talk about social being determines consciousness, actually, we're talking about the conscious mind, not the subconscious. So the conscious mind is basically only 5%, no doubt the leading factor in the mind, if you say. But the conscious mind has to act on the subconscious to change the entire mind, change the entire outlook of the person. We talk about outlook. If the entire outlook of the person has to be changed, it must be changed at both levels, the conscious level and at the subconscious level. Now, we have taken it for granted that social being, I mean, if we develop ideology, our mind automatically, if we develop ideology, it means Marxist ideology, we automatically become a proletarian values we get. But that's not a one-to-one relation. Ideology functions at its level, at its plane. Our consciousness depends on our existing. To what extent are we, see, people are born into this capitalist or feudal world. So naturally, their subconscious will be attuned in that way. Because the environment in the first 7-8 years, there's that atmosphere, the family, their family, friends, relations, classmates, all that is all there. Now, again, it's not one-to-one, but basically it will be in that sphere. Now, when we gain ideology and Marxism and we know some of these bourgeois values, what we call bourgeois values and all are not good and we have to change proletarian value, we have to get other values and things like that. We have to use our conscious mind to convert also the subconscious. When we say outlook, proletarian outlook or something, outlook in this day and age, we understand as the entire mind comprising of the subconscious and the conscious. So naturally, the subconscious must change. This factor is not considered when we deal with our change in our rectification movements, this, that, all these type of things. We just deal with it at a superficial level, basically in the conscious mind, what is observable to people. So why people talk about mysticism and things like that, because I have focused on changing the subconscious mind, that is the internal. Now that the spiritualists do. The spiritual people talk, oh, we must become happy, we must be this, we must be that. So people think that you're talking in a spiritual way. But I am saying what the difference between the spiritual and what I'm saying is, spiritual only talks about changing internal self, forgetting about the external world. My thing is that there's a dialectical, it's not that the commune, that is the party or the organization or this thing or the collective which you mentioned, is any authoritative factor. It's a dialectical relation, because I might, like the spiritualists say, I might change myself, I might adopt all the natural values, what I call anuradha values, internalize that. But when I come out into practice in an alien atmosphere, all those get forgotten. So it is only in application that I really know whether I have really changed those values. So it's a dialectical relation. You can't have just the collective and the individual. Yes, the individual has to assert their conscious mind to change the subconscious. And then in interaction, unless that individual also changes his environment and makes it in that way, then he will also, he or she will also revert back to the same thing, assuming he's changed. So it is a continuous process of dialectical relation between the individual and collective, and the individual, as he or she changes, also changes his environment. It's not in isolation. The environment also changes in that direction. And unless the environment also changes in that direction, it's pointless. You are being a sadhu. That's what they're accusing me of, say, being a mystic or something like that. It's pointless. You have to change the environment in that mold, basically.
In that line, if I may add, or if I may extend my question, so far what I could gather from the scholars and practitioners, from Marx to Mao, all have said about better individuals to form a better society.
Yes.
The idea of cultural revolution, failed or not, was based on this very idea.
Yeah. Correct.
The way your view of a happy and free individual is being criticized, do you think the responsibility of this journey towards the betterment of an individual falls on the individual only, and the collective plays a role of authority to judge the individual?
I feel that the responsibilities lies primarily on the individual, but the collective cannot be just a judging factor. I mean, the collective is a part of the environment in which the individual lives, and the individual has to impact this thing, and each is judging the other. I mean, the collective is judging the individual and the individual is judging the collective, and in that way things change. So the question is that even in the culture, one has to study that more. It seemed a lot of impositions by the Red Guards and this and that, and you see a lot of fake pretenses one sees it in proletarian organizations, so fake, when you have criticism, self-criticism sessions, I mean, you see the same thing. But you saw it in the Cultural Revolution also. So, but that was an experiment. One has to see where it's gone wrong. And I don't know, that time also they probably didn't use psychology and things like that. Now things are much more developed. And one can use those aspects of it. But it's really a fusion of the collective and the individual. And the individual can only evolve as part of the collective, not in isolation. And that's what the spiritualists and the mystics and all these people say. And as far as happiness goes, maybe the people didn't, the Marxists didn't talk about happiness in that way. But I would think it's a common sense thing that when you're trying to build a new society, it is not just the starting point is economic necessities. If you don't have the economic necessities of living, you cannot be happy. But once you have that, there's so many other factors come in which make people, you see, in our middle class circles or in other circles, people are not happy. Why? It's not because only of insecurity of this thing. So much intrigue in the family, in the collective, in relationships, and this and that, all that type of one-upmanship, all that type of stuff is going on. People are not happy. That's also probably happened in the Soviet Union and all these other places where these value systems didn't change. The question of freedom wasn't there. And once values and freedoms are inculcated in the individual and in the environment, that is the starting point for happiness. Given that your economic necessities are met. Now, socialist societies met the economic necessities, but whether it met these is another factor. And I'm not blaming anyone, or we are not blaming this thing. These experiments one learns through experience. I mean, the Soviet Union lived through the Depression, through the World War, through this, through that. They had a real tough time. 2 million people died in the Second World War. The imperialists, the other allies, played games with them and tried to push Hitler against the Soviet Union. And basically, it's they who defeated the fascist forces, and America sought to get the gains from it. And so the Soviet Union did have a tough time ever since it was formed, and besides being the first experiment. So when people criticize Stalin or this one or that one and all that type of stuff, I don't think it's right, because it's not morally correct. It was the first experience. Learn from it and try and do. That's what China did. That's why they evolved the Cultural Revolution, walking on two legs. They didn't have a strong state sector. They combined state and private. They learned from it. They didn't weep about what Stalin did wrong and all that type of stuff.
Right.
I mean, they learn from it and they try to implement. That's the correct way of going about it. And we have to learn from both China and Russia, the failures in both those places. And go ahead. Take the moment ahead.
Right. You have quite often talked about, just now you also told about this, in your book also, Set of Good Values, you have referred to Anuradha's value system. Yeah. And in that connection, you have also talked about a trade-off between moral values and delivery efficiency within a collective resistance effort. Don't you think this is quite inevitable in a scenario of continuous struggle? What alternative could you ask for? And while you are talking about that, don't you think that you are antagonizing the non-antagonistic contradiction within the society?
See, when I talk about, yes, a trade-off between efficiency, especially in an Indian society, but we'll come to India afterwards, take the general, which is hierarchical and Brahminical from its roots. But even in general, what I was referring to basically was in the decision-making for promotion and leadership. Normally, one's efficiency, abilities, organizational capabilities, all those things, if they are very good, the question of values is ignored. And the person is promoted to a leadership positions and things like that. And and 90% of the time, I would think those gain priority and not the values of the person. I take my own Anuradha example. There's an Anuradha Memorial Committee and all that. They've written, she's a good intellectual, she was a good organizer, she was a good mass leader, she was good everything. But when I talked about the values, no one accepts that aspect of it. Or they reluctantly accept it. I don't think that so much expect. I think that's an important aspect, but of course it came naturally with her. It wasn't that she had to struggle too much to get it, maybe because of the atmosphere she was brought up in. But so the question is that what I'm saying is for leadership, at least the two should be balanced. I'm not saying just only see values and pure goodness and a person who is incompetent be promoted. I'm not saying that. There should be a balance between the two at the time of promotion of to leadership positions at any level. Because basically what I've noticed is that importance is just given to the other aspect. And it is not given to the question of values. In Indian context, this is all the more important because I have seen also in my practice, in a feudal and this Brahminical society, people from upper caste or males, compared for patriarchy and for caste, automatically develop because from childhood they are brought up in a more educated, in a more in an environment which makes them more competent as far as efficiency goes. Right. While those from oppressed or the mahilas or the women may not be as efficient. So in such an atmosphere, when we talk about fighting at the building up the non-Brahmin traditions in India, even at this elementary level, I think it gets a lot of importance because even from body language, you can tell a person if he's from a upper caste or a low caste and things like that. I mean, women you can only tell from looks, but people you can tell from a lot of people, persons you can tell from that. Just the body language and the confidence, the level of self-confidence. Well, if a person is with self-confidence, he'll be more efficient, he'll be more capable, he'll be more that person lacking self-confidence, which is normally from the lower caste or women or something like that who suffer patriarchal or caste oppression. They will not have that type of self-confidence. And so they will not be so effective. So what is the role of the organization, the party, or whatever it is to build up that. So in the general also it applies, but in India it is really fundamental, where we have a strong Brahminical hierarchy that exists right from in all the castes or everywhere in society. The Brahminical, which I mean feudal ideology that exists everywhere.
Thank you. Thank you for the detail. I may be wrong, but while I was gathering feedback on your book from readers across different walks of life, I got an impression that between the lines, there is a finer tune to differentiate the experiences of Jharkhand movement that you have learnt in jail and the experience of Bastar movement. Do you suggest any difference in experience of radical politics in these two regions?
See, I don't know much about the Jharkhand or Bihar or that side of the movement. I've hardly interacted with that area. That's what they call the MCC area or something like that. But in Jharkhand jail, I saw a lot of, there were many people, there at least 100, 150 people who were inside the jail. And I saw their behavior. I saw how people referred to them. I saw the villagers. I spoke to a lot of villagers which were part of the mass, strong hardcore of this movement, who from those areas. And they were very, they said that their opinion was that till about 2000, 2003, 2004, it was going all very well. That's when they didn't have money or arms. But after that, when they got both, somehow things very bureaucratic functioning, autocratic, this, that, all that type of stuff came in. And it got reflected in organization and their dealings with the villagers at all levels. So in that way, it was quite negative. And I saw that reflected out there in the jail also, the type of people who were middle-level leaders, basically, who were there. They were totally apolitical. They were their attitudes were basically wrong. They trying to join with, as I mentioned in my book, with the jail mafia and all that type of stuff. There were no real difference between them and anyone in society, ruling elements in society. So, but on the other hand, Bastar, I heard a lot. Anuradha had worked there 3 years. I'd read a lot of reports. I myself have gone there and come back 2-3 times. And I saw the organization gave a lot of it. I don't know whether they did it in Andhra. There was, all these people were mostly Andhra leadership, people who had come from there. But I don't know what happened in Andhra because it was wiped out. But here at least I saw a lot. And you see, unlike Jharkhand has a very rich tradition of tribal revolts. Right from the 1770s, a series of them. Right, Birsa Munda was 1902, that was much later. But continuously you will find tribal revolts in which thousands have died. Santals and Mundas and all of them. On the other hand, in here you have this only one tribal revolt, the Bumkal revolt of 1910. But there was such a rich tradition. And on the other hand, they were not, and other aspect of this, they were all educated. A lot of the tribals were educated, informed and things like that. Unlike here they were the most backward tribal. Firstly, didn't have such a rich, they have a tradition of fighting, but not only I could only hear about this Bhumkal revolt, while there they had about 20 such, much larger than the Bhumkal revolt in Jharkhand. And secondly, they were very backward. When in the early 80s, when the Telugu people from Andhra, Telangana came across, they had no clothes, they had no education, they had no medical care, they had nothing. They didn't even know agriculture. They were hunters mostly. Such a backward area probably hardly existed in the world. And from that, they were being brought up, and you see in Bastar or Dandakarina, you see that they've been able to give a lot of attention to their language, to their development, to their rights. I mean, the personality of these people have been developed. And for that, a lot of attention was given. Where it is now going, I don't know. But at least in the earlier stages, you saw that. And so you'll find even the media, Bhusha media is reporting that tribal women are basically all the leadership level in the military and all those structures. So there's a world of difference. There, in fact, Jharkhand, there was this one person who was helping me, whose village was the Adda, as they say, of the Maoist up till 2000, 2003. I mean, he said that they're so located that they come and stay there 3-4 months, have their camps, have this thing, do everything out there. There was no problem. But in spite of spending so much time, he said they didn't do one element of developmental work. So developmental work is the physical work. Development of the individual is even a different aspect of that. So development work is one aspect, talaus and building ponds and fisheries and increasing the economic level of the people, agriculture, showing them, developing and seizing that. All that type of stuff is one aspect. Development of the individual is also then part of, or another aspect of that. So there I didn't see much developmental work. No, forget about the development of the individual. But Bastar has a lot of developmental work. In the very first round when I went, they had built 100 talaus and this. And there it was absolutely necessary also in Bastar, in Dandakarnia, because the thing is that they were so backward. So everything had to be taught to them, from agriculture to fishery to animal husbandry to all aspects of life, and which they did do. Indian government hadn't done it for 40 years. So that difference was certainly there. And that much I could see, at least. I could observe.
If you allow me, let me add something a bit related, but a different question. Actually, this is a question from one of our colleagues. This is about a possible dilemma for the radical organizations who tactically boycott election. During election, there seems to be some apparent dilemma faced by these radical organizations, which are engaged in developing mass struggles or, in some places, armed struggle. They are only left to negotiate with the electoral organizations during this election period. As long as the area of struggle is not entirely in some supposedly liberated zone, what alternative agenda could these radical forces pursue during this election time? Any thoughts on that?
No, this question of elections, I think we have also, I don't know the details because I can just learn from the farmers' movement, and then now some section has gone into elections and politics, and they seem to be making a mess. The other sections have opposed it. But in nowhere in any theoretical formulations have they said elections is a strategy. It's a tactical issue. It can be used in any form of organization, and any method can be used so long as the long-term goals are kept in mind. And as far as elections goes, see these people involved in struggles, armed struggles and all, they say that seizure of power. No, power to the Soviets, all power to the, what's it? All power to that slogan, all power to the Soviets should be the sort of slogan and all that. The question of power should be there. I mean, where do you give a president of power unless you are in some liberated areas or something like that? It's all artificial if you give it. Yes, if you are taking part in elections, the question of power does come. So I feel a lot of mass movements just drift away and nothing happens. You have a lot of militant mass movements. We've had it here in Maharashtra, a lot of trade union movements. What have we got in result? Nothing. Zero. So somewhere, the question of political power, whether it is there, I mean, I'm not saying that in India it's so corrupt, the whole electoral system is so bad and so corrupt and all that type of stuff and so much money and all that. So how one evolves, but the question of power has to be posed somewhere. Otherwise, all the mass movements will just drift into nothing. And that's what's happening. After 20 years of building good trade movement, this movement, that movement, that movement, what do you have in hand? Now, we have to see what the Kisan movement brings forward, because they've really done something effective, and one section is not participating in these elections, but I don't think they're boycotting also. I think they left it to their people to vote. Certainly in Bengal, I think they did vote against the BJP. They propagate against the ruling, against the BJP for this thing, indirectly, whatever. So it's not that they did not intervene in the election. They did intervene. Probably they're also intervening in UP and, I don't know, Punjab. But how they are intervening, I don't know. It's not come out. But one should really learn from experience. But as far as any tactic goal, nothing should be ruled out. Things depend on the conditions, times, changes, everything changes. There have been such huge changes today, worldwide even. So we should not rule out anything. Otherwise, we'll become very mechanical in our work. And that's what happens, basically.
Thank you. Thank you for this detailed answer. In most cases, you are talking about farmers' movement. I am not talking about the farmer movement in particular, but in most of the cases at present, we witness a tendency to separate movements on nationality issues, caste-based identity issues, gender and sexual identity issues, environment issues from class-based movements. From class-based movements. If these were properly dealt with by the working class movement, the identity issues could have served the purpose of new democratic revolution. What your take on this?
Yeah, that's what I feel, which I think I added in the book, said that Indian Marxism should build on our long progressive traditions in Indian past, which is our non-Brahmin movement. It starts from the Lokayat movements, the Buddhist, the Bhakti movement, right up to present time, Phule, Ambedkar, Periyar, and such people. So we have a 2,000 years history of such progressive tradition, and we negate that. Marxists have negated that. Marxists here, instead of copying from Russia, China, and all these places, we have to evolve our own traditions based on this really rich tradition of democratic movements or progressive movements that India has had right from the start, which for the last 2,000 years. And it's a continuous process also. And if we don't take it forward, the writers or the Hindutva elements will co-opt them. So, and what tends to happen in, firstly, we are not able to take it forward because we have not internalized what the Marxists should be the interpretation in India, this building on the non-Brahmin movement in the history. Then when these Dalit politics or the feminists and all these type of people, identity politics come up, we jump onto the bandwagon. That's also harmful because identity politics divides the people. Whether it's on the women's issue or Dalit issue. I mean, when I was interviewing, people came to interview me for this book. And I said, I'm opposing. They were shocked. Identity politics. They say everyone is supporting. All leftists are supporting. I said, I'm shocked if all leftists are supporting because I just come on the jail. I don't know, because the whole question is identity politics, like the black movement abroad, is not able to target the real enemy and find out the real friends. It sees all upper castes as enemies and all Dalits as friends. That is not so. You draw a fissure. All progressive people, Democrats, whether they belong to upper caste or lower caste, should fight against the caste system. That is, you fight against the ideology of Brahmanism, not against upper caste and Brahmins or something like that. So also with feminism. It's not male versus female, which some of them go to extreme levels and do, but against the ideology of patriarchy, which is feudal basically, which is very, even the patriarchy in India is quite different from patriarchy in USA or in the West. That is based on capitalism, which is far milder. In India, it is far more pernicious. The feudal, it is more prevalent in so many forms, the patriarchy. So we fight against that ideology. And as far as the environmental goes, that is a real big issue being used by the ruling classes today. All the top Klaus Schwabs to the World Economic Forum, to the Democrats, to everyone is making that a major issue. And greenhouse gases is a major issue. They're diverting their attention to deal with what they have destroyed the environment. They're trying to deal with it through corporatization of the whole system. So who are the main promoters of greenhouse gas, green energy? In India, it's Anil Ambani and, it's Mukesh Ambani and Adani. So, and worldwide also, it's Telsa or someone like that. These are the people who are going in for green energy. So they are completely diverting, and I'm surprised. A lot of the Western leftists are also falling in the trap, like Monthly Review and all. They've written books and books on the environment problem as though that's the major issue of capitalism. That is only one of the symptoms of capitalism. And the problem of solving it is not what these people are talking about, these Democrats in the West or Klaus Schwab, or all of them, green, or the climate change. What's that conference that takes place? The greenhouse gases you must reduce and all that type of stuff. I mean, you stop cutting forests. You're destroying the Amazon. You're destroying forests all over the world. India hardly has any forests left. You start afforestation programs. You just prevent your real estate and your mining mafia and all these from destroying all the land. You prevent pesticides and these GM seeds and fertilizers from destroying the land, and you build water harvesting. You do all that. India has the largest number of rivers in the world in that small geography, and we have the worst water shortage. Even our groundwater is finishing, they say. What is this? the whole direction of the climate change thing is going in corporatization, and the left are also falling into that trap. Instead of, so in all these three spheres, the left or Marxists are really giving the agenda over to the.
We're losing words. Okay.
I mean, we are just trailing behind what the ruling classes are doing, whether it's in Dalit identity or feminism or this thing. And feminism, tell you, it also affects women nearly as much as men. I mean, they just accept their role. Many women, especially in India, I'm not talking about the West, but they accept their secondary role. That's also part of patriarchal thinking, if you accept a secondary role. So one has to encourage them out of it. It's not that.
Mr. Ghadi, before going to my next question, there is a question asked by one of our friend on Facebook. What you talked about the bureaucratic attitude of the organization regarding the trade-off of moral values and delivery efficiency. Is this bureaucratic attitude only result of a value system, or there is also a stagnation of movement at a particular stage? When movement stagnates, the activity of the organization becomes authoritative, bureaucratic, isn't it? If yes, then how to tackle it at the time when movement stagnates?
I don't think it's only when it's static, because if you see the bureaucracy rose in a country like Russia or Soviet Union, it was also linked to the economy, the strong state economy. And as I mentioned also in the book, I clearly stated that many of the Trotsky and those people in those days, others also, I think Rosa Luxemburg and many of the others said that, yes, there was bureaucracy in the organization, and it had to, the source of it was the democratic centralism of the party, that structural change was necessary. But as I brought out in my book also, you make any structure, but if the leadership is autocratic, that organization will be autocratic. So, or bureaucratic. If the leadership is autocratic, the organization will be bureaucratic. And you have any structure, the most liberal or loose, or that's even worse. In fact, democratic centralism, on paper at least, is the most democratic, because the majority opinion should hold. It doesn't in practice, but that's what should be done. So, no doubt, when there's stagnation, all diseases come to the forefront. What already exists in generally in the structure of bureaucracy, even in a very strong moving movement, only people don't notice it then. When things are all going well and things like that, you ignore that because everything is going well and the leadership is leading properly and movement is developing and all that stuff. So we don't notice or give that much attention. But as soon as things start collapsing, those monsters start coming out, and not only bureaucracy, so many other things start coming out. So it's part of a continuous process of interaction between, on these questions of freedom, happiness, and value systems. And there's no shortcut to it. And it's not overnight also. It has to be at the times of peak of the movement, also at times of crisis. And crisis, of course, many worms start coming out of but the worms already exist in the wood. So it's not that they suddenly come. The seeds are there.
Right. Let me get back to my question. You were talking about the left or Marxist failure to understand this environment and other identity. The state of anti-imperialist struggle in the fight against the most concentrated finance capital ever seen. In popular language, if we borrow from the farmers' movement, the struggle against corporate criticizes all the Communist Party for their failure to understand the state structure. While saying that India is a semi-feudal, semi-colonial, it essentially refers to a system post-permanent settlement. And that way, it fails to understand the overdetermined relationship of colonialism and the mimicry of European understanding of feudalism. So, the pre-colonial situation has never been explained by the Indian communists, and their understanding has relied much on European interpretation of Indian history, culture, language in almost every field. Do you think an effort is needed to revisit the learnings that the urban educated India has borrowed from James Mill, Max Muller, Halhead, etc.?
Probably yes. I have not studied that issue very much, but certainly a lot of any analysis of history in a scientific way, because history tends to be very much distorted, helps us understand what exists today. And certainly what you say is there. And so one has to get back to all those points to understand better what exists today. So, but I don't have any knowledge in that sphere. So I won't talk, but certainly it has to be revisited, all these aspects. And there, I think a lot of earlier historians were mostly Marxists. But I don't know how much they've gone, like Didi Kosambi and others have gone into a lot of these type of things. But I myself don't remember much. I read it long back. So we have to develop on that, certainly, and look into these things. Regarding, the corporate sector, when I come out of jail and I see the level of concentration of capital worldwide and in India also, which I brought out in my latest articles in Corona Capitalism. This I only realized that while researching the lockdown and researching the pandemic and things like that. I didn't even realize it was so bad. Just generally centralization we knew, but the extent of these asset management groups controlling all the companies virtually of the world, that was something new to me. And that's these three companies, BlackRock, Vanguard, and Street City. And certainly these situations have changed now. So what should be adopted? What should be this thing? I'm not really gone into all those things, because actually at the ground level, I found, at least in India, whether we say semi-feudal or semi-colonial, unless it's linked to the direct work we are doing, the tactics we adopt, I never saw that link at all. And as far as the strategic concept goes of democratic revolution, everyone knows, yes, okay, democratic revolution, that everyone's, even the parliament, CPI, CPM, ML, Maoists, everyone says that, democratic. So that's okay. That's not debated, except for some ML who talk about a socialist this thing, but everyone talks about a democratic revolution. But the question is that more after the Russian and Chinese experience, and in the realm of activities and work, there has to be a much more living link, I think, between theory and the practice, which I personally did not see so much of that. When we had big debates and clashes on the question, is India semi-feudal, is it not semi-feudal, this, that, all that type of stuff was there, but it's not so much linked with the practice of the movements. Now, the farmers' movement, what is it? Based on what? What is it? Semi-feudal, capitalist? What is it? I don't know. It's more the imperialist penetration. It's those areas which have broken out, the Green Revolution areas. Now, what is the nature of the structure at the ground level? I don't know. It requires further analysis. But the farmers' movement effectively built up a mass movement. They effectively united various stratas. For that, we must learn. They effectively targeted the two main enemies, Adani, Ambani, all that. They did excellently, I think. So it's best to learn from experience also and practice. Let's see where they go. I don't know what their plans are. So because one section has gone to elections, the other sections has opposed it. And so what they plan to do in future, I don't know. Let's see.
Okay.
But we should learn.
We have come through your note, quite a spirited one, about your high hopes on the revolutionary legacy of Bengal. Even with that legacy, Bengal has managed to hold high the signboard of a regime led by a supposedly communist party for long. Now that you are criticizing the communist forces believing in armed struggle, are there any reason to believe that you are coming close to the parliamentarian lefts?
Don't take me wrong. I'm not criticizing anyone. I'm not supporting anyone in the realm of tactics. That I leave to people who are involved in the field. I'm dealing with it at a philosophical level, and Marxists in general, communists in general. I certainly am not trying to criticize anyone. I'm only supporting one person. That's the farmers' movement. Now, they're, I know, led by a lot of leftists, but they also have people like Ticket out there. And so they've really been able to hold various sections of the people together. Some are the Punjab movements, I think, are more ML types groups. But the UP farmers movement, the Haryana farmers movement are certainly not that. They're practically, what are Khaps? Feudal? I don't know. But certainly it's a really broad movement in which they've been able to hold everyone together. So I'm not going into the realm of tactics, and nowhere have I attacked any form of struggle. What I'm saying is that basically, whatever the form, depending on the situation, what I have said, of course, is that the two successful or three successful or one even unsuccessful, the Paris Commune, or the armed struggle movements were only during world wars when the ruling class were at loggerhead. That's a historical fact. I just put that now that people should consider that historical fact that when the ruling classes came to such a situation of armed clashes with each other, it was only in such time that the two armed revolutions, were successful. In peace times, those in the field will have to think. But what I'm saying is that basically that all organizations, whether parliamentary, non-parliamentary, or whatever it is, all communists who are seeking change have to think of these methods of improving the organization itself through value systems, through freedom, the question of this thing, and with the goal of happiness. So it's in that philosophical sphere that I'm dealing, basically. I'm not touching on the question of tactics or things like that, because who am I? I'm an individual. So I'm not it's not right that I touch on things like that. I leave it to people in the movement or practice to do that.
Okay, it is already 10, so this will be my last question.
Yeah.
As it will be the last question and I need to give you some context, it will be a bit long, but I won't take any more questions now. Last we talked on last Friday. Last we talked on last Friday or Saturday, Friday. Last we talked on last Friday, a couple of hours after we finished talking, a young man, Anish Khan, was murdered after midnight here in Bengal, in Howrah district. The murderers were in police uniform, and so far 2 police persons have been arrested. Anish was involved in the student movement of Alia University. Anish was quite active in anti-NRC movement. Anish was organizing people against the issue of deliberate failure of public health system to make way for the people with money and close to ruling party to enter into the lucrative business of health service. For the last couple of days, there have been demonstrations, processions led by students and activists of democratic movements demanding justice for Anish. We can only hope that the murderers and their masters are going to be booked under law. Now, with this context, there is a peculiar observation. Most of the parliamentary and political organizations barring BJP, ranging from Congress, Trinamool Congress to ISF, CPI, CPIM, even Naxalite parties are claiming that Anish was their supporter. And the counter narrative is Anish was politically fickle, a bit whimsical. An individual in search of answers to his questions is going to different political organizations, being engaged with them both in conflict and in collaboration as well, and is being blamed for not taking a regimented position on his own. Individuals search for a right collective with which we started today's discussion and a collective way of handling the search, does that in any way relate to your understanding of the journey of an individual to be a part of collective?
Well, I don't know about Anis's case, but a lot say a person can be opportunist, he can be this, he can be that. But I fail to see the fact that why everyone is trying to claim that he's part of our organization. I mean, there's some insecurity involved there, because he might have been anywhere. That's not the important thing. The important thing is that the state has killed him, and it should be opposed. Wherever he belonged, whatever he did, even if it was 50% okay, 50% compromising, whatever it is, basically the state considered him harmful, and so they eliminated him. And certainly that's the key aspect. And an individual does, if you get individuals and individuals, some may be opportunists, some may be trying to find this thing and all that, but that's not the important. Here, obviously, here was a person, a young person who was trying to find his roots or find his way. And individuals go for, I started as a Gandhian, maybe for a very small time when I was faced with racism in London. And then I found I didn't get answers there. I shifted to saw Marxism, and I went there. I mean, people come to the truth or the genuine thing through various paths depending on the situation. And today the situation is not good that you have the strong revolutionary movement and asking it, so it's easy to align with something. Right. If that is there, then it's very easy. People find the path very easily. But even internationally, there's no communist state. When we came to communism, how come we quickly found the Marxist path? Because there was China at that time there. The Cultural Revolution was going on. All that was there. We all got attracted there. So we could easily leave Gandhi. But say if that was not there, then I don't know where I would have gone. And in today's context, there's nothing in India. There's nothing in the world. There's no real alternative. So an individual nothing wrong with the individual searching. An individual will search. The important point is for those who are more conscious to build that alternative, rather than find fault with an Anis or poor fellow or whatever it is who's anyway dead. So that is the thing. And everyone claiming that it shows the fickleness there, actually. Wherever he didn't belong, I don't know. One wouldn't expect mature parties to resort to such fickle things as trying to claim and grab an individual, whatever it is. Where he was, whatever he was doing something which the state didn't like. So they eliminated him. So whatever. So basically that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gandhi.
Okay, thank you, Anis.
Actually, yes. I kept you awake.
No.
1 hour past your bedtime.
No. I nowadays I sleep by about 10-ish only. But that's because I made sure that I slept in the afternoon so that I am fully alert and awake for the discussion.
Okay, yes, I was in a rush to make it finish by 10 or 10ish. So yes. It was a wonderful session. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
আপনারা যারা দেখলেন, যারা পরে দেখবেন, তাদের সকলের কাছেই বলার যে ফ্র্যাকচার্ড ফ্রিডমের বঙ্গানুবাদ প্রকাশ করেছে কাউন্টার এরা প্রকাশনী। এটা বঙ্গানুবাদ করেছেন পরিচিত গদ্যকার গল্পকার সুপ্রিয় চৌধুরী। বইমেলাতে পাওয়া যাবে, ধ্যানবিন্দুতে পাওয়া যাচ্ছে। আপনারা যারা প্রয়োজনীয় মনে করবেন সংগ্রহ করবেন এবং কাউন্টার এর ফেসবুক পেজ থেকে ডিটেলটা দেখতে পাবেন। আজকের মতো কথোপকথন এখানে শেষ করছি। অনেক ধন্যবাদ, নমস্কার, শুভরাত্রি।
ওকে,
গুড নাইট।
থ্যাংক ইউ, গুড নাইট, থ্যাংক ইউ। ওকে।